Nicolae Ceausescu came to power in Romania. Romania was part of the Soviet bloc at the time, and Ceausescu ruled Romania as its communist leader and ultimately its dictator. From the time he rose to power in 1965 until 1989, when he got thrown out, he was a tyrant. He was a dictator ruled with an iron fist. 1989, though, that was the year the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union started to fall apart. And that year, Nicolae Ceausescu faced a huge popular uprising at home in Romania. And that popular uprising at home in Romania, it ultimately became a revolution. It was bloody. In the end, Nicolae Ceausescu, look at those crowds. In the end, Nicolae Ceausescu was overthrown by his people. He and his wife were, in fact, executed. And that was not the norm. Former communist countries, former Soviet republics mostly did not have to go through violent revolutions and killing their leaders in order to turn themselves into democracies. But that is what happened in Romania. That is how they started to become a democracy in 1989. But the memory of that revolution is fresh. I mean, 1989 is not that long ago. And that's why it attracted international attention earlier this year when Romanians suddenly started taking to the streets again in huge numbers, numbers that literally had not been seen since the revolution in 1989. In February of this year, look at that. What brought all of those people out into the streets was something absolutely incredible that the elected Romanian government tried to get away with. The leader of the ruling party in Romania has a couple of problems that are interfering with his desire and his intention to become prime minister. Two problems. One is his previous conviction on corruption charges. Two, the other thing that's in his way is the other set of corruption charges that are still pending against him, in addition to the ones for which he has already been convicted. That's a real problem for the guy who's the leader of the ruling party in that country. These corruption convictions, these pending corruption charges. So in February, the government in Romania decided that they were going to deal with this problem in a very creative way. They were going to deal with this problem faced by, in particular, this one politician, by making corruption legal. Literally, they tried to pass a law in February that would make official misconduct, bribery, abuse of your office, misappropriation of funds, it would just make that legal, as long as the amount of money involved was less than $40-something thousand. Turns out the corruption charges against the head of the ruling party were in the $20,000 range. So if that bill had passed, he'd be clear. What he had done would retroactively become legal. They literally tried to legalize corruption. That was in February. And they might have gotten away with it, except for those crazy kids, because this is what happened in February in Romania. I mean, in February in Romania, it's cold, right? But look at the capital city. Look at the streets. Hundreds of thousands of people turned out. Hey, government, the answer is no. You are not doing this. You are not making corruption legal for your own convenience. And people stayed out in the streets every night for like a couple of weeks. Eventually, the government caved. Bribery and corruption and abuse of office went back to being illegal. But the head of the ruling party was still the head of the ruling party, and he still had this problem. He's still got that corruption conviction. He's still got these pending corruption charges against him. And so now the government in that country tried to go back at it. Their second pass at this problem. They decided, okay, we learned our lesson a little bit from last time, learned our lesson from February. We will no longer try to declare corruption and bribery to be legal. Instead, they came up with legislation this time that would effectively issue automatic pardons for any public official convicted of corruption or bribery or abuse of office. I think they figured that maybe the public had, gotten their yayas out in February. The public maybe had cooled off a bit after those gigantic protests that they had. Maybe the public had stopped paying attention. Turns out that was a miscalculation, because like flipping a switch, here they come again. Romanians by the thousands back into the streets of their capital city last night. And this time it did not take as long for the government to get the message. The free pardons for official corruption bill was voted down in the Romanian Senate last night after the people of Bucharest in Romania started to fill up the streets again. And so now this thing finally looks like it's dead. After the vote, people reportedly drove around the parliament building all day today, honking their horns, reminding the parliament that they're still out there. And it's interesting, even though they won this one, people in Romania are now calling for more protests there in the days ahead. Not apparently because they're worried the government is going to try to sneak this thing through again. I think, as far as I can tell, and I'm reading all foreign press about this and stuff, but as far as I can tell, I think they want more protest in the days ahead just to punish the government for even having the gall to have tried this again after they couldn't get away with it in February. They tried to make corruption illegal. They tried to make it legal, and then they said, no, we'll leave it illegal, but anybody who does it, if they're a public official, they get a pardon. Yeah, and the people of Romania said no. So that was Bucharest. That was the capital city in Romania last night. In our country, we do not have a recent short, sharp memory of a bloody revolution, right? Of leaders overthrown, let alone executed. We don't have crowds storming through the legislature, throwing papers out the window like we saw in Romania in 1989. Here in this country, we don't do that. At least we don't do that in the last couple of centuries.